The Joe Rogan Experience.
One thing in your favor about when it comes to martial arts, although it is mostly Asian in origin, it varies so widely. There's Chinese martial arts, Japanese, Korean. I mean, it goes on and on. Thai. There's so many different styles.
Yeah.
And then, of course, South America, once Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu got into the mix.
Of course.
I mean, they, in my opinion, have revolutionized martial arts more than any other group. I think that one part of the country in South America and Brazil, they've had more of an impact on martial arts, I think, than anyone, because they essentially started, they started the Ultimate Fighting Championships just to see if their martial art was superior.
Yep.
And they proved it to be so, at least on its own, by itself.
Yeah.
At first, before anybody knew about it.
I think that stuff was, there's the whole period from when Japanese martial arts were kind of crashing because nobody was dressing as a samurai anymore, doing that stuff didn't make sense anymore, and Jiu-Jitsu was seen kind of as low-class activity for gangsters, and, there was less and less popularity for that field. And then when Jigoro Kano, the creator of Judo, started, he was this nerdish upper-class guy, but he was very passionate about Judo, so he transformed the Jiu-Jitsu curriculum into Judo, gave it a whole new spin. It's like, no, it's not this thing to beat people up like all the thugs you have seen so far. We're using Judo as a form of education. And
so
then
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a super cool story. And then he starts sending people all over the world to spread it. And so they go to Russia and then mix with Russian thing and they create Sambo. And then come out here and then with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when Maeda goes down to Brazil and all of that. So it's like, that whole story, how it spins, is awesome. And then you end up with the joy of globalization, where like when you see like Hoist going to fight against Sakuraba, and you have, Brazilian dude trained in what originally was an Asian martial arts, transformed into this Brazilian thing, wearing a gi, going against Saku, who was more of a catch wrestler, who had studied more through Western wrestling a whole lot. It was hilarious. It's like you have the Japanese guy with a more Western wrestling background, and it's funny.
That is crazy. The Japanese, especially Sakuraba, were way influenced by catch wrestling, but which is American folk style wrestling.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I didn't know that that jiu-jitsu was used by thugs.
Yeah, that was the part of the reason why it was
Japan.
crashing in popularity, is because it used to be sort of the samurai arts, right? You do that stuff. But then the samurai ended, by the 1870s or so. That was the collapse of the samurai. So there really wasn't a function for this stuff anymore. It's like, and the only people who trained were mostly gangsters and kind of rough guys who trained because they got into fights on the street. And then Kano, because he was this kind of sickly child, they put him into training jiu-jitsu to kind of build him up, give him some strength. And he was a complete nerd, but he loved jiu-jitsu. And so he's like, no, don't put it down. It's a great art for other reason. And he had this whole way of spinning it around to say, that was the old stuff, to beat people up. What we do today is a form of education, is a relationship with your body. And he basically invented a new function for it. So the Japanese society went, oh, shit, we can still do that stuff. And now there's a better reason for it that's fitting the times. That's not the same reason why we would train in the 1700s.
Right.
These actually fit the context of our time. Okay, let's do judo. And then...
Do they have texts where you could see the techniques or where you could see what similarities?
Yeah, there are both ancient jiu-jitsu manuals where there are, the drawings and stuff like that. And then by the time Kano comes around, they even start having footage after a while.
Right. Footage of actual films of utilization?
Yeah, they look,
or drills?
They look goofy as hell because they are sped up and they move funny and stuff. But they, there's great stuff. And some of those guys are just badasses from day one. I mean, some of the old judo guys, they got the reputation for just being killers,
Yeah, well, for sure, judo. I wonder how much jiu-jitsu has changed since then to now, because obviously in putting so much emphasis on the ground, the Brazilians really refined all the submission techniques to a razor-sharp edge and really changed a lot of the original setups and the way people enter into submissions. I would love to see what it used to look like.
Even that's funny, because if you look at like some old judo, like Kozen judo, where they have is very ground-oriented, those guys do leg locks.
Really?
It's like you see these Japanese guys from the 1920s leg locking each other, and you're like, oh my God. So the stuff that today is hot, some of these guys were doing, and it probably wasn't as refined, but it was like, man, they were doing it. That's
catch wrestling. Catch wrestling was all
exactly.
about leg locks.
Exactly.
They were leg locking when, you know, the Americans were really into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and stuff. Is this, what do you got here, Jamie? 1600 AD? The history of Jiu-Jitsu or Yawara. Huh. Wow. They dressed up in like Aikido kimonos with the big flowing pants. And the guy's like doing some weird sort of wrist lock. Go, stop scrolling. Go right up there. Was it? Like, yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, he's wrist locking and getting the elbow in a...
Yeah. Interesting. And then the other one, it looks like he's setting up a full Nelson.
Yeah, he has a half Nelson on one side.
And he's got an underhook on the other side.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Yeah. Probably gonna spin around and slam him right on his face.
Yeah. Crazy that they have, you get to look at it in these images. So they were just trying to figure out, like, what's the best way to manipulate the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing to me how much of it came from Japan.
Yep.
I mean, Japan, so many interesting techniques, and that one area was so vital and so important when it came to the development of martial arts.
Japan has that weird, like the story between China and Japan is very similar to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. You know, a lot of the developments came from Greece, a lot of the developments came from China. But then both the Roman and the Japanese took those ideas and then ran with it and systematized them, gave them a lot more of a structure, made them way easier to learn and to teach.
Yeah.
And then popularized them as a result. And it was like, yep, now this stuff works. It's a lot easier.
Interesting, too, that they brought it to other countries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was part of Kano's vision, because Kano was not a nationalist. He did not have this Japan, fuck you everybody else. He had this idea of like this universal brotherhood of mankind, so we need to bring our stuff so that everybody can benefit from it. And so he sent people all over the world.